The first step is to do our tracing. I have dampened my leather thoroughly and then set it aside for a little while until it starts to return to its natural color. Since I'm just making a picture here, I'm making this out of an 8 to 9 ounce vegetable tanned leather. Now to start with, I will just make a few lines, as you can see. Then I will lift my pattern and you'll see that I've got a real nice line and it's not too deep. Please note I have taped my pattern at the top so I can lift it from time to time to check my progress. Now we've got lines on here that are straight lines, and we've got some like right here that are dotted lines. We will trace straight lines as straight lines and dotted lines as dotted lines. We'll also have lines like here where we'll have some long hair endings, and we'll trace those lines as you see them on the pattern, as I'm doing now. I will do the same thing to this other leg. Trace the leg and then the long hairs. Now we will continue our tracing using the same rules. Straight lines, or shall I say dotted lines, and solid lines, and other lines that represent hair endings. Here along the neck, you'll notice we have some folds, and I'll just trace those lines as you see them on the pattern. We'll be making shortcuts on these. Very carefully trace the head, the mouth, the nostril, and especially the eye. The eye on a buffalo is quite small compared to the size of the head. Be careful when you trace the horn and the ear. You'll notice we have the buffalo standing in the grass on this particular picture. So I'm tracing the grass as you see it as long straight lines, which will be cut when we actually do our swivel knife cutting. But we will do that last. We will not do that in the beginning. And that completes our tracing. Now we'll move on to the swivel knife cutting. To do the swivel knife cutting, I'm going to use the ergonomic knife with a 1/4 inch thin ceramic blade. And I like the one with an angle. So even though this is a ceramic blade, it's still a good idea to strop it on a piece of cardboard coated with jeweler's rouge. And I'll start by first cutting the legs. And I'll do the front leg first. I'm cutting rather deeply on the outer edges. When we get to some of the cuts in on the body, we will cut it not quite as deep. Now here on the tail, I will start by making some short cuts, as you can see. This is be the long hairs on the end of the tail, and then we will carefully cut the tail. The end of this cut, I'll taper off slowly. Now the other cut, we will continue to come around the back of the buffalo, and we'll cut all the way up to the head. I'm giving you a little closer look here because I'm now doing the horn very carefully. And we'll do the ear as well, making sure we stay on the line. Another very important thing to cut is the eye. I will very carefully cut the upper lid. Please notice the turn on the swivel knife. We'll cut the lower lid. We'll cut half of it in one direction. We'll turn and do the other half in the other direction and join them up. Now we will do the nose. We will come around and carefully do the mouth and the nose. And now we can continue cutting on the top of the head. As we do this area under the neck, you'll notice these are a bunch of short cuts, as you can see. Same thing on the beard. And on the area behind the neck where we have a bunch of folds, we will do these with short cuts, as you can see. This is how our buffalo looks after we have done all the swivel knife cutting. Please note at this point we have not cut any of the grass. We will do that later. We have made cuts, as you can see here, along where we'll have long hair endings under the jaw and under the neck. And please note that the dotted lines we have not cut. We will use those as a guide for beveling. To do the beveling, we will use 5 bevelers. We're going to use 2 checkered bevelers, a B702 and a B701. We'll use 3 figure carving bevelers, an F895, F896, and an F902, which is a very pointed small beveler. I will begin the beveling with the F895 figure beveler, and following the dotted line on the front shoulder, you can see how I am outlining the shoulder. After you do the first line of beveling, as you can see here, then we'll take the tool, lean it back so that the leading edge does not dig in, and we'll slowly taper it off to give it a more three-dimensional look. We will do the same thing on the back of the shoulder, and of course a buffalo has a cape, so we will bevel it to make the cape stand out. Now, in this case, we'll not bevel quite as deep as we did with the forward part of the shoulder. And we will, of course, taper it off like we did before, leaning the tool back and slowly tapering it off, as you can see. Now we'll do that with the hindquarters as well. At the back here, we will bevel the back of the leg closest to us. And we will taper it off. We will do the same thing when we bevel the tail. We'll make one run, as you can see, come back and deepen it slightly, and then we will taper it off. And we'll do the same thing now on the top side of the tail. When we get to the inside curve here on the tail, we will use the smaller of the figure bevelers to do that inside curve, and then we will taper it off, go back to the larger one, and taper off the top side. We will use the checkered beveler to go completely around the outside of the animal and also around the horn and the ear here on the head. The reason we're using a checkered one there is that there's a lot of texture around the ear and the horn on the head, so using a checkered one will give us a little more depth, and it'll match up better with the texture around it. And we will go completely around the animal with the checkered beveler. This is how our buffalo looks after we have done all of our beveling, except the beveling we're going to do with the pointed beveler. Please note now that we have a nice form of the front leg and shoulder. The head is formed nicely, as is the tail and the hindquarters.